I think that that's something we're both familiar with. You know, Tilda and I are both the same age and had a lot of the same experiences. And we certainly know what it's like to have had a friend that you knew maybe in your 20s or as a teenager who you haven't seen in ages, and then suddenly you see them again and you sort of pick up right where you left off.
And she doesn't feel like a character to me. She feels like a receptacle of all sorts of impulses and gestures and perspectives that I feel are very close to my own heart.
The snow was falling, falling faintly through the universe, and faintly falling on all the living and the dead.
I was reading a quote from Pedro, and he said that there were some moments on set where he and some of the crew were so moved by what you and Tilda were doing that they were on the verge of tears. And I'm wondering if you felt similar emotions during some of those very dramatic moments.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you try to elicit from yourself as an actor is that sense of connection. And obviously we're telling a story that feels at once deeply personal and also very universal because we're all mortal and we all are going to face death at one time or another. And I think that all of us have dealt with loss. So often when you watch these things, it activates those feelings in you. So I was very touched by a lot of situations. One in particular that I found really touching, and I think is an example of what human beings do for each other. It's the point where Martha learns that she's not going to recover, and she's really, really having a hard time. And Ingrid gets her settled down in bed, and Martha says thank you, and all Ingrid can say is, "I'll see you tomorrow," which I think is so beautiful because it's like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to be with you through this whole period.
And jumping off of that, another thing that I read about from Pedro was that he was saying, referring to you, he was saying, the great actresses know how to listen and react in silence. And I thought that was an interesting thing. And can you talk about that aspect of your performance where it's more about just sort of observing and listening? Because obviously this character is taking in quite a bit throughout the film.
Well, as an actor, you're responsible for all of your moments of language and action, and also of listening. It's all part of the same package. It's like how do you manage to become a real human being on screen? That's always the challenge. In this case, I was really fortunate to be working with a really wonderful actor, working with Tilda, and really just listening to her. And as you listen, you listen the way you would in real life to someone, where you're trying to offer them support and really hear what they're saying and try to ascertain what it is they need from you at that time. It's an active state, listening. So that's sort of what you enter into.
I think it's an interesting thing to try to pull off. Two people who've known each other for a really long time, but in this case haven't really kept in touch for some years, and that's a tricky balance.
Right.
Can you talk about how you and Tilda kind of accomplished that state of being?
I think that that's something we're both familiar with. Tilda and I are both the same age and had a lot of the same experiences. And we certainly know what it's like to have had a friend that you knew maybe in your 20s or as a teenager who you haven't seen in ages, and then suddenly you see them again and you sort of pick up right where you left off. I think in a sense it was kind of great for us because we did know each other a little bit. We knew each other from like film festivals and press events and stuff, so I had kind of a tertiary relationship with her that then actually grew in real time, which is kind of what happens to these women too. They reconnect, and there's a lot of kind of filling in the blanks. But then suddenly, where their relationship intensifies and grows is in the time that they spend together, in these last few months. So, it's I think that, I think given where we are in our life, like I was saying, given what we've experienced, it was something that was very easy to enter into.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, and
Thank
congrats
you.
on the film.
Thanks a lot. Nice to talk to you.
I was reading a quote from Pedro, and he was talking about how he gave you what he thought were some very challenging monologues to work with, and obviously he seemed very grateful that you knocked them out of the park. But I'm curious if you found playing Martha and having some of those long bits of dialogue challenging?
They were challenging only in that he only gave us 1 or 2 takes. That was the major challenge because they were, there's a lot of information that, and this often happens in Pedro's films. You know, people will meet, very often people who haven't seen each other for a long time, and say, how's it been going? Tell me what's happened in your life. And then someone will talk for 8 minutes. That is a thing that we've come to expect. It's a sort of architecture, formal shape in his world. So that it's always a challenge, but it was also grace because, as I say, it's a thing that we all recognize in our own lives. Believe it or not, we do actually do that, even when people are not filming us. We do tell each other for 8 minutes what we've been doing, and then the other person speaks normally. But in this case, it was more one-sided because Ingrid was there to listen. It was the not getting 15 tries at it that was the main challenge. But we learned to trust that and to trust him and to just move on, which is the most difficult thing I think about our work, is just learning to take a deep breath and move on and just trust that it's there.
Well, it's funny because I was going to ask, some actors find particular characters hard to shake off at the end of the day or even after wrapping production. And I wonder if Martha is that kind of character for you.
Do you know, she didn't really, she doesn't feel like a character to me. She feels like a receptacle of all sorts of impulses and gestures and perspectives that I feel are very close to my own heart. So if anything, I feel I was filling her with myself. I know Pedro has said this. You know, he made it possible. The story, the conditions of the story are very personal to my own experience. I've been in the Ingrid position many times in my life, never so far in the Martha position, but I've learned from the Marthas that I've been witnessing and supporting, and I have learned that and really taken on that perspective of hopeful, self-determined fearlessness around the inevitable. I mean, it's not just unlucky people who die, and it's not just unlucky people who lose people that they love. And I've known that for a long time in my life. That's a great privilege that I'm very grateful for. So it wasn't about creating a character. It was more about responding as myself. And apart from the fact that I'm happy to say so far I'm not terminally ill and I'm not estranged from my daughter and I wasn't a war correspondent, but apart from that, we're close kin, me and Martha, and our impulses are very similar. And so it was a sort of grace to just live in it and be really unperformative, which is what we wanted the film to be. Very, very simple and undramatic, in fact.
Well, it's a splendid performance, and congratulations on it, and thank you very much for your
Thank you very much, Eric.